Então aqui agora com a gente no palco, Chris Mills. So, Chris Mills.
Hello.
First of all, I'd like to give a notice that your shirt is the best one around. Death metal, right?
Oh, yeah.
Awkward. Okay, so tell us a little bit about, I know you work with documentation, right? Most of the people think that documentation is something boring and stuff like that. But who is a long time working on software development? We know it's not. So give us a little round about documentation, how you end up working on Mozilla, and a little about your background.
Okay, so very first I was spawned. A death metal fan is not born, we are spawned. So a long time ago, I got my first job doing computer type stuff. I lied and said that I knew HTML in the interview. I think that was how most of us got our jobs, first of all. Then I kind of learned what I needed to know and started editing books about web standards. And that was kind of interesting, but I didn't like the idea that all of these books were getting sold for money. So I thought, well, I'll go and work for browser vendors instead and do stuff that people can look at for free, because I'm also a big fan of open source, especially open source documentation, open source education. So my first browser vendor gig was working for the Opera browser, not the Oprah Winfrey browser, as was sometimes mistaken for, but the Opera browser. We have actually had people ask us that before. So how come you work for Oprah? It has actually happened. And I was there for about 6 years. But then after a while, I kind of got bored. I'd been doing the dev.opera.com site for a long time, so we had lots of cool documentation on anything from CSS to JavaScript and SVG, etc. But then I got the call to come and work on MDN, which, great, that's one of my favorite sites of all time. And I would say to anybody that thinks documentation is boring, well, we're all geeks here. We're all interested in things that other people might find a bit boring, but it's fantastic to be able to spend a lot of your time playing with nascent APIs and breaking them and writing use cases for them and doing cool stuff, especially that now we have all of the device APIs to play with, so we can start mucking around with hardware, and we have the WebGL stuff like Nick talked about earlier. So it's getting more and more exciting as the time goes on.
And I know you're kind of passionate about web education, right? Teaching code. How's that? How you get involved with that?
So this is mainly something I decided to just do myself, because it's kind of a common thing. I have 3 children, and one of the most common things that my son and his friends ask me is, they look over my shoulder as I'm working, they're like, oh, how'd you do that? I'm like, well, I would tell you, but it's going to take a while. It's like, but really, I love the idea that anybody can become empowered through learning just a little bit of code and just publishing something on the web, getting their point across, sharing their ideas, although, there's a lot of people, especially if you look at YouTube comments, you do see quite a few people that you think you shouldn't be allowed to share your ideas. But I jest. I think everybody can be empowered through this great medium that we call the web. So I've started to run a whole bunch of courses teaching basic web design and web development and the basic principles of coding, for example. I've done one-on-one sessions with people. I've taught a class of 25 10-year-olds how to do basic web design, and that was a serious challenge. But I just think that, we have all this great knowledge and we should share it for the good of everybody.
Nice. And last but not least, as I also mentioned, and you showed up here, you have this side project, right? I don't know if we can call that like a side project, but you're really into music and you play, so tell us about it. How does it happen? Where do you have time to do that? So tell us a little bit about it. The name of your band,
well,
for the metalheads here.
So how do I manage to keep on doing a lot of music at the same time as doing all this stuff? The answer is pretty much I just don't sleep anymore. I have 3 children and I have a full-time job, and I'm currently doing 2 bands. Although the band that you're probably thinking of is actually just split up. My main band, conquest of steel.
Yeah.
We're going for 17 years, and we've just ended. We've just decided to part our separate ways and go and do some other things. But again, it's this kind of idea that, you know, there's a lot of creatives in our industry, and I think it's good for us all to have something that we do on the side of just all mad coding, just because you can kind of draw influences to use in your work from absolutely everywhere. So music is my main thing that keeps me ticking outside coding, and yep, I think everybody should find one.
Amazing. Chris Mills, aplausos, por favor, pessoal.